Drifter Cowboy found a dying girl, until she called him father. He found her half buried in red dust, ribs rising like broken fence posts, and when she whispered, "Papa," the drifter's hands shook like a guilty man at the gallows. The sun didn't rise that morning. It clawed its way up, bleeding orange over the New Mexico flats, dragging heat and dust behind it like a funeral shroud. The drifter rode alone, as he always did, saddle creaking with every slow step his tired mare took. His hat was low, shadow swallowing his eyes, but not deep enough to hide the hollows in his cheeks or the way his knuckles whitened around the reins. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. Not since the dream. Not since he heard the child crying again, the one he couldn't save. The wind carried grit between his teeth. He spat, but the taste stayed, dry, bitter, like regret ground fine. His canteen had gone empty yesterday. His lips cracked when he breathed. He didn't care. Water was a luxury for men with destinations. He had none. Just open land, open sky, and the ghosts that rode beside him, silent and patient. He crested a low rise, reins slack, gaze drifting across the cracked earth below. That's when he saw it, the broken wagon. One wheel split clean through, the other half buried in sand. Canvas flapped like a dying bird's wing. No horses. No bodies. Just silence. And then, movement. A small shape. Curled beneath the wagon's skeletal frame. Bare feet black with dirt. A dress, once blue, now gray with dust, torn at the hem and stiff with dried sweat. Hair matted, face turned away. Not breathing. He nudged his mare forward. Slow. Quiet. Like approaching a rattler. 10 paces. 5. He dismounted, boots sinking slightly in the powder-soft earth. The girl didn't stir. He knelt. One gloved hand hovered over her shoulder. He hesitated. Touching her might mean responsibility. And he'd spent 10 years running from that. He touched her anyway. Skin like sun-baked leather. Hot. Too hot. Fever. Her breath came shallow, quick, each inhale a whisper, each exhale barely there. He pulled his canteen off his hip, uncorked it, tipped a few drops between her lips. She didn't swallow. He cursed under his breath, dipped his bandana in the last dregs, pressed it to her mouth. This time, her tongue flicked out. A swallow. Then another. Her eyelids fluttered. He froze. One eye opened, hazel, glazed with pain, pupils wide and swimming. She stared at him. Not with fear. Not with confusion. With recognition. Her cracked lips parted. A whisper. Barely there. Carried on a breath thinner than smoke. Papa. The word hit him like a bullet to the chest. He recoiled. Fell back on his heels. Stared at her like she'd risen from a grave he'd dug himself. No, he rasped. You're mistaken, child. But she didn't blink. Didn't look away. Her small hand twitched in the dust, fingers curling like she was reaching for him. Papa, she said again. Stronger this time. Clearer. You came back. His throat closed. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped thing. He hadn't held a child since the fire. Since the night the timbers groaned and the roof fell in and he ran while his wife screamed his name, ran while his daughter's cries faded behind him. He'd buried them both in his mind. Every day since, he buried them again. Dug the grave. Lowered the coffins. Shoveled the dirt. Over. And over. And over. And now, this girl. This stranger. Calling him father. She coughed, a wet, ragged sound that shook her whole body. Blood speckled her lips. Her eyes fluttered shut again. But her hand, it stayed outstretched. Waiting. He looked around. No tracks but his own. No sign of whoever left her here. No water. No food. No mercy. Just the wind. The sun. The silence. And her. He could leave. Mount up. Ride west. Pretend he never saw her. Pretend the word "Papa" had never left her lips. The desert wouldn't judge him. It never did. It only swallowed. Only forgot. He reached down. Took her hand. Small. Burning. Trembling. "I ain't your father," he whispered, voice rough as saddle leather. "But I'll get you out of here." She didn't answer. Couldn't. But her fingers curled around his thumb. Weak. Desperate. Trusting. He lifted her, light as kindling, brittle as dried sage, and carried her to his horse. She didn't cry. Didn't speak. Just rested her head against his chest, breath shallow against his heartbeat. As he mounted, settling her in front of him, the wind picked up. Dust swirled around them like a veil. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled, lonely, hungry, haunting. He kicked the mare into a slow trot. Didn't look back. Couldn't. Because for the first time in 10 years, he wasn't running from the past. He was riding straight into it. And the girl in his arms, she knew his name before he ever told her. She called him Papa with blood on her lips, and when the town doctor refused to help, the drifter traded his last silver coin for a loaf of bread and a bottle of whiskey meant to clean wounds, not drown memories. The ghost town didn't have a name anymore. Just a signpost snapped in half, lying face down in the dirt like a fallen soldier. The saloon doors still swung, not from patrons, but from the wind that howled through busted windows and carried the scent of old smoke and mouse droppings. The church stood crooked at the end of the street, its steeple listing like a drunkard, bell rusted silent above. This was where he brought her. Not because it was safe. But because the dead didn't ask questions. He laid her on a cot inside the abandoned general store, its shelves bare except for dust and a single rusted tin of peaches, long spoiled. He tore strips from his spare shirt, soaked them in the last of his canteen water, and pressed them to her forehead. Her skin still burned. Her breath still hitched. But she was alive. Barely. He left her side only once, to find help. The town's only doctor lived above the saloon, if you could call him that. A man with yellowed fingers and whiskey breath, who charged $2 just to look at you. The drifter had one silver coin left, the last thing tying him to his old life. He placed it on the table. The doctor didn't touch it. "Who is she?" he asked, squinting through spectacles smudged with grease. "Doesn't matter." "It does if she's got kin lookin', dot." "No kin," the drifter lied. "Just found her." The doctor leaned back in his chair, the wood groaning under his weight. "Fever's bad. Might be typhoid. Might be worse. I ain't riskin' my neck for $1.50. The drifter didn't blink. $2. That's all I got. The doctor smirked. Then she'll die cheaper. The drifter left without another word. Didn't slam the door. Didn't curse. Just walked down the creaking stairs, past the saloon's warped floorboards and the flies buzzing over spilled beer, and out into the blinding sun. His hands didn't shake. His jaw didn't clench. He just walked. Like a man who'd been refused mercy too many times to be surprised. He spent the coin at the bakery, if you could call it that. A shack with a brick oven still warm from the morning's last loaf. The baker, a woman with flour in her hair and sorrow in her eyes, wrapped the stale bread in brown paper. Then, without asking, she handed him a bottle of cheap whiskey. "For cleaning," she said softly. "Not drinking." He nodded. Didn't thank her. Couldn't. Words felt too heavy. Back at the cot, he tore the bread into tiny pieces, soaked them in water until they softened, and fed them to her one crumb at a time. She swallowed. Slowly. Painfully. But she swallowed. He uncorked the whiskey, poured a little on a rag, and dabbed at the cuts on her arms, shallow, like rope burns. She flinched but didn't cry out. Just watched him. Eyes half-lidded. Trusting. "Papa," she murmured again, voice like dry leaves scraping stone. He didn't correct her. Didn't have the heart. Night fell. The wind picked up, whistling through broken shutters. He built a small fire in the store's stone hearth, just enough to warm her, not enough to draw attention. He sat beside her, back against the wall, rifle across his lap. Sleep wouldn't come. Not with her breathing like that. Not with her whispering in fever dreams. Mama sang, the blue song, she murmured, eyes closed, fingers twitching against the blanket. His breath caught. The blue song. His wife's lullaby. The one she sang while rocking their daughter in the old oak chair by the window. The one he'd whistled sometimes, when mending fences or walking the fields at dusk. No one else knew it. No one. He'd never written it down. Never taught it to another soul. And yet, this girl, this stranger, hummed it under her breath. He leaned closer. "What did you say?" She didn't answer. Just turned her head toward him, cheeks smudging the blanket, and sighed, a sound so small, so childlike, it cracked something open inside his chest. Outside, footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Boots on wooden porch. He stood. Rifle in hand. Heart pounding. The door creaked open. An old man stood there, bent with age, eyes milky with cataracts, holding a lantern that cast long, trembling shadows. "I heard the fire," he rasped. "Ain't had warmth in this town in years." The drifter didn't lower the rifle. "She's sick." The old man nodded. Didn't step inside. Just held out a small clay jar. "Honey and sage. Good for fever. My wife used it." The drifter hesitated. Then took it. "Why?" The old man smiled, thin, sad. "Because someone once did the same for me. And I never got to thank M." He shuffled off into the dark, lantern bobbing like a dying star. The drifter closed the door. Sat back down. Opened the jar. The scent of wild sage and sweetness filled the air. He dipped his finger, touched it to her lips. She licked it. Smiled faintly. "Thank you, Papa," she whispered. He didn't answer. Couldn't. Because now, he wasn't just lying to her. He was starting to believe it himself. And that scared him more than any gun, any desert, any ghost. The bounty hunter rode in at noon, cold eyes, colder revolver, asking about a stolen child and a murdered rancher, and when the drifter looked into his face, he saw the ghost of the man he'd left to burn. The sun hung directly overhead when the hoofbeats came, slow, heavy, deliberate. Not the trot of a traveler. The stride of a man who knew exactly where he was going. The drifter heard them before he saw the shadow stretch across the warped floorboards of the general store. He'd been spooning honey sage paste onto the girl's tongue, her fever finally breaking into sweat instead of fire. She'd slept through the morning, breathing steady for the first time since he found her. He didn't want to move. Didn't want to break the quiet. But the hoofbeats, they didn't ask permission. He stood. Rifle in hand. Not pointed. Not yet. But ready. The door didn't creak this time. It swung open with a shove. The man in the doorway wore a long duster, dust-stained and stiff with dried rain. His hat was black. His eyes darker. A silver star pinned crooked on his chest, not law. Not really. Just a badge bought with blood money and a reputation for finishing what he started. His right hand rested easy near his hip. Near the revolver. Evenin', the man said. Voice like gravel under wagon wheels. The drifter didn't answer. Just shifted slightly, putting his body between the stranger and the cot. The bounty hunter's gaze flicked past him. Landed on the girl. His lips twitched, not a smile. A predator's calculation. Heard tell you picked up a stray, he said, stepping inside. Boots thudded on the floor. Pretty little thing. Shame she's been through hell. What do you want? The drifter asked, voice low. The bounty hunter stopped. Pulled a folded paper from his coat. Tossed it onto a dusty shelf. Recognize her? The drifter didn't look. Didn't need to. He already knew. Says here she's Eleanor Vance. Daughter of Jacob Vance, rancher out of Silver Creek. Man was found dead 3 weeks back. Throat cut. House burned. Girl gone. Rewards $500. Dead or alive? The drifter's knuckles whitened on the rifle stock. Don't know her, he lied. The bounty hunter chuckled. Funny. She called you Papa when the baker saw you carrying her in. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Like smoke before the flame catches. The girl stirred. Mumbled something in her sleep. Turned her head toward the sound of voices. The bounty hunter's eyes locked onto her. Hungry. Cold. She's worth more alive, he said softly. But I ain't sentimental. The drifter exhaled. Slow. Steady. You got no proof she's the one. I got a witness who saw her necklace. Silver locket. Engraved. To my Ellie, love always. Ring a bell. The drifter's stomach dropped. He'd seen it. Around her neck when he wiped the dust from her skin. He'd tucked it under her dress, thinking nothing of it. Just a trinket. A keepsake. Now, it was a death sentence. He didn't move. Didn't blink. Even if she is, you got no right to take her. The bounty hunter's hand drifted closer to his gun. I got the right paid for by the county. And by the men who want her father's killer brought to justice. The drifter's throat tightened. And if the killer's already dead? The bounty hunter smiled. Then I'll settle for the man who let him die. The words hit like a hammer. The man who let him die. Jacob Vance. The drifter remembered him. Not as a murderer. Not as a monster. As a neighbor. A friend. A man who'd shared his whiskey on cold nights and helped mend his fence after the storm. A man who'd begged, to stay that night. To help fight the fire. To save his family. But the drifter ran. He ran while Jacob screamed. While the timbers cracked. While the roof fell in. He ran, and Jacob burned. And now, this girl. Jacob's daughter, calling him Papa. The bounty hunter took another step. Last chance. Step aside. The drifter didn't. Instead, he raised the rifle. Not to fire. Just, to warn. The bounty hunter froze. Eyes narrowed. Hand hovering. You really gonna die for a lie? He asked. The drifter's voice was barely a whisper. Maybe. A long moment passed. The wind howled outside. The fire in the hearth popped. The girl murmured in her sleep. Then, the bounty hunter stepped back. I'll be at the saloon, he said. Come nightfall, I'm taking her. With or without your blessing. He turned. Walked out. Didn't look back. The drifter lowered the rifle. Hands shaking now. Not from fear. From memory. He walked to the back of the store, past collapsed shelves and broken glass, and pushed open the rotting door that led to the overgrown yard behind. The church stood 50 yards away, crooked and silent. Between them, dry earth. Hard. Cracked. Waiting. He grabbed a rusted shovel leaning against the wall. Started digging. Not for her. For himself. He dug until his hands blistered. Until the sun dipped low and painted the sky in blood-red streaks. He dug until the hole was deep enough to hold a man. Deep enough to hold his sins. When he finished, he wiped his brow, dropped the shovel, and walked back inside. The girl was awake. Sitting up. Blanket pooled around her waist. Eyes clear. Calm. "Papa," she said. He knelt beside her. Took her small hand in his. Calloused. Dirty. Trembling. "I'm here," he whispered. She smiled. Weak. But real. Outside, the church bell didn't ring. But the coyotes did. And somewhere down the street, a revolver clicked. He wasn't ready. But the night was coming. And it wouldn't wait. By firelight, she hummed his dead wife's lullaby, then whispered the color of her shawl, the way he kissed her forehead, and the truth he buried, that he ran while the house burned and left them screaming. The fire popped. A spark leapt into the dark, died before it touched the floor. Outside, the wind moaned through the broken slats of the general store, carrying the scent of dry sage and distant rain that would never come. The girl sat propped against a rolled blanket, wrapped in his spare coat, too big, sleeves swallowing her hands, sipping water from a tin cup he'd scrubbed clean with sand and spit. Her cheeks still held the flush of fever, but her eyes, they were sharp now. Clear. Watching him like she was memorizing his face. He didn't look at her. Couldn't. Not yet. He stirred the fire with a stick, gaze fixed on the embers, heart pounding like a hoofbeat against his ribs. "Papa," she said softly. He grunted. Non-committal. Safe. She didn't press. Just set the cup down, pulled the coat tighter, and began to hum. It started low. Barely there. A thread of sound woven into the crackle of flame. But he knew it. Knew it like his own heartbeat. Knew it like the scar on his left palm from the branding iron that slipped. Knew it like the weight of the shovel in his hands tonight. The blue song. His wife's lullaby. The one she sang while rocking their daughter, his daughter, in the old oak chair by the east window. The one he'd whistled under his breath while fixing the barn door, while walking the fence line at dusk, while standing over their graves with empty hands and emptier soul. No one else knew it. No one. He looked up. She met his gaze. Didn't flinch. Didn't smile. Just watched. "You remember it," she said. Not a question. A fact. He swallowed. Used to hear it, long time ago. She nodded. Like she understood. Like she'd been waiting for him to say it. "Mama wore blue," she whispered. "The shawl with the white flowers. You gave it to her on her birthday. Before the snow." His breath caught. He had given her that shawl. Wool, soft as a sigh, stitched with tiny white daisies along the hem. She'd worn it every winter. Even the last one. Even the night, he stood abruptly. Turned his back. Stared at the wall. At nothing. At everything. "How do you know that?" His voice was rough. Broken. She didn't answer right away. Just pulled her knees to her chest, rested her chin on them, and whispered, "You kissed my forehead before you left. Said you'd be back by supper. You whistled that song, walking out the door." He closed his eyes. He had done that. The morning of the fire. He'd kissed his daughter's forehead, warm, sleepy, smelling of milk and sunshine. Told her he'd be back before the biscuits burned. Whistled that damn lullaby all the way to the barn. He never came back. Not in time. The fire started while he was mending a broken axle 3 miles west. He saw the smoke. Rode hard. But when he got there, the roof was already caving. Flames licked the sky. And Jacob Vance, his neighbor, his friend, was screaming from the porch, axe in hand, trying to break through the beams to get to his own wife and child trapped inside. The drifter froze. Didn't run toward the house. Ran past it. To his own. He found his wife at the window, face pressed to the glass, eyes wide, arms pounding. Their daughter behind her, crying, small hands slapping the sill. He screamed. Tried the door. Locked. Jammed. He grabbed an axe. Swung. Missed. Swung again. The roof groaned. A beam fell. Smoke poured out like a living thing. He ran. Not away from the fire. Away from the choice. Away from the moment he'd have to decide, save his own, or help Jacob save his. He chose neither. He chose himself. And by the time he turned back, both houses were ash. Both families, gone. Or so he thought. He turned now. Slowly. Looked at the girl. Her eyes were wet. Not with tears. With knowing. You ran, she whispered. He didn't deny it. Didn't move. Just stared at her like she'd pulled his soul out and laid it bare in the firelight. I was scared, he rasped. She nodded. Mama said you would be. His knees nearly buckled. Said, what? The girl wiped her nose with her sleeve. She said if the fire came, you'd run. Not 'cause you didn't love us. But 'cause you loved us too much to watch us burn. He sank to his knees. Right there. In the dust. In front of her. His hands trembled. His breath came in ragged gasps. He wanted to speak. Couldn't. The words were ash in his throat. She slid off the cot. Bare feet on cold wood. Walked to him. Small. Steady. Unafraid. She knelt too. Put her hand on his. Warm. Alive. I forgive you, Papa, she said. He broke. Not with a sob. Not with a cry. With silence. The kind that comes after a storm. After a burial. After a man has carried his shame so long, he forgets what it feels like to set it down. He pulled her into his arms. Held her like he'd held his daughter that last morning. Held her like he should have held her that night. Held her, and didn't let go. Outside, the coyotes howled. The wind whispered through the ruins. And somewhere down the street, a bootstep crunched on gravel. The bounty hunter was coming. But for now, in the firelight, with her small heart beating against his chest. He was home. And he would die before he ran again. At dawn, they walked out of town hand in hand, no horses, no money, just a canteen and a lie that had become truth, because when she whispered, Papa, in the dust, he finally stopped running, and started belonging. The sky bled pink when they stepped out of the general store, not the violent red of fire or blood, but the soft, forgiving hue of a world waking up. The girl held his hand. Small fingers curled tight around his calloused thumb, like she was afraid he'd vanish if she let go. He didn't blame her. He'd spent 10 years vanishing. From towns. From memories. From graves he refused to visit. But today, he wouldn't disappear. Not again. Not ever. Behind them, the town slept, or pretended to. Shutters drawn. Porches empty. The saloon door still. No sign of the bounty hunter. No clink of spurs. No cock of a revolver. Just silence. Thick. Waiting. He knew the man was there. Knew he was watching. Knew this wasn't over. But the drifter didn't look back. Didn't search the shadows. He just walked. One boot in front of the other. Girl at his side. Sun warming their backs. They had no horses. His mare had vanished in the night, whether stolen or spooked, he didn't care. They had no money. No food but the last heel of stale bread wrapped in his coat pocket. No map. No destination. Just the road. Just the horizon. Just each other. She stumbled once. On a rock hidden in the dust. He caught her before she fell, swung her up into his arms without a word. She didn't protest. Just rested her head on his shoulder, humming that damn lullaby under her breath, soft, sweet, stitching the silence together like thread through torn cloth. He carried her until the sun climbed high and the heat pressed down like a hand on their heads. Then he set her down, uncorked the canteen, let her sip first. She drank slow. Careful. Like she remembered thirst. Like she knew what it was to beg for water in the dirt. "Where are we going, Papa?" she asked, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. He looked out, past the scrub brush, past the cracked arroyo, past the distant line of mesas hazy in the heat. "Don't know," he said honestly. "But we'll know it when we get there." She nodded. Like that was enough. Like it had always been enough. They walked. Past the last broken fence post of the ghost town. Past the sign that no longer bore a name. Past the place where he'd dug his own grave the night before, now just a scar in the earth, already half filled by the wind. He didn't stop. Didn't look. Some graves don't need markers. Some men don't need to be remembered. Just, forgiven. By midday, the heat turned cruel. The girl's steps slowed. Her breath came quicker. He pulled the brim of his hat low over her eyes, draped his coat across her shoulders like a shield, and let her lean against him as they trudged forward. Every few minutes, he'd stop, let her rest, press the canteen to her lips. She never complained. Never asked to turn back. Just kept walking. Like she trusted the road because she trusted him. And that trust, it weighed more than any bounty. Cut deeper than any bullet. They stopped at a dry creek bed when the sun hit its peak. Sat in the thin shade of a juniper, backs against its gnarled trunk. He tore the last of the bread in half. Gave her the bigger piece. She took it, but didn't eat. Just held it in her lap, staring at it like it was something holy. "Mama used to save the crust for me," she said softly. Said it was the best part. His throat tightened. She was right. She looked up at him. Eyes clear. Calm. "You're not gonna leave me again, are you?" He didn't answer right away. Didn't look at her. Looked instead at his hands, scarred, cracked, stained with dust and old blood. Hands that had dug graves. Held guns. Buried memories. Hands that had run, when they should have stayed. He turned them over. Palms up. Like surrender. Then he took her hand. "No," he said. Voice rough. Final. "Not ever again." She smiled. Small. Tired. Perfect. She ate her bread. He ate his. They didn't speak. Didn't need to. The wind did the talking, whispering through the brush, rattling dry seed pods, carrying the scent of sage and sun-baked stone. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried. Lonely. Free. When the shade shrank and the heat pressed in again, he stood. Offered her his hand. She took it. Didn't hesitate. They walked until the sun dipped low, painting the desert in gold and violet. Until the shadows stretched long and the air turned cool against their skin. Until the first star blinked awake above them, small, distant, watching. He found a place to stop, a shallow overhang in the side of a sandstone bluff. Not much. But enough to break the wind. Enough to hold a small fire. He gathered dry brush, struck a match, fed the flame until it crackled and danced. The girl sat close, knees drawn up, watching the sparks rise into the dark. She didn't ask for a blanket. Didn't ask for a story. Just leaned against him, head on his shoulder, and sighed, a sound so small, so content, it stitched something broken inside him back together. "Papa," she whispered. He looked down. "Yeah, little bird." She didn't answer right away. Just stared into the fire. Like she was gathering words. Like she was choosing them careful. "I'm glad it was you," she said finally. "Who found me?" He swallowed. Hard. "Me too." She closed her eyes. Breathed slow. Even. Outside, the coyotes began to sing, not howls of hunger, but calls of kinship, echoing across the empty land. The fire burned low. The stars multiplied. The desert held its breath. He didn't sleep. Didn't dare. Just sat there. Arm around her. Rifle across his knees. Eyes scanning the dark. The bounty hunter would come. Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe never. It didn't matter. He'd be ready. Not to run. Not to hide. To stand. To fight. To die, if he had to. Because some things are worth kneeling for. Some lies become the only truth that matters. And some girls call you Papa, and make you remember what it means to be human. The fire burned low. The girl slept deep. And the drifter, for the first time in 10 years, let himself believe in tomorrow.